Oh, it reminds me of Komugi and Killua. Goto. I think he'll go down fighting. Oh, that's great. That's cold. Whoa. Yeah, they're gonna get stuck. Give himself a base. Oh, okay, hold on. Goto's got something for us. Ah. Oh, okay, look at this. They're twisting. He'll figure something out. He always does. There's gotta be a third option for Hisoka. There always is. Ooh. Ooh. It launched out of there. Pay attention, pay attention. Oh. Oh. Whoa. Great animation. Ah. Oh, so that launched him up like a rocket. And it keeps launching him throughout the forest. That's Hisoka. Careful, man, it could be a misdirect. I believe he'll do that, but there's always more to it. Oh no. Oh. That's cold, man. Ah, Goto. It was inevitable, of course, but sucks to see. Shinigami. My god. He just oozes style, doesn't he? And charisma. Hisoka, that is. God damn, I love Hisoka. But again, I feel bad. You know, I do feel a bit sad for Goto. You know, he's been around for a long time. Or he was introduced really early on in the anime. Just like Komugi. You feel all tingly. Oh, that's great. So, Amane. Ooh. Oh, okay, Amane. But that's why it's better if there's two riders. This is bizarre. Okay, this is just straight up silly, to be honest. Riding her grandma. It's okay. Sometimes things are just silly and kind of stupid. This is one of those times. Oh. Whoa. Is that right? Yeah. Okay, Subane. Kind of checks out, to be honest. Ah. That's the end of the chase.
この10分差で何をする？
変装？
ブブかわいいね。キルア様が私たちを巻いて最もやりたいことは
仲間との連絡。
Yeah, get a call. Call
じゃ
in.
絶対私たちにバレずに連絡を取り合うためには今この状況での肝を考えな。仮に私たちがキルア様はそこにいると分かってても近づけなければ確認しようがない。そんな場所は
He's got to create enough distance so they can't get to him.
分かったかい？
Ah, and that's how you create enough distance. You go up into the skies. Okay. It's a cozy it's a cozy sight, isn't it?
お待ちしておりました。
Okay.
やるじゃねえか。
Not bad at all.
手配も済んでおります。その様子じゃ一気だな。真面目かお前ら。最低でもゴロキ借りて目的地をばらけさせ
You need decoys.
イルミを負けねえだろ。さっさと手分けして手続きしろよ。登録名。
She's got a lot of questions.
あんたね、少しは自分で考えたら。
I'm sure she can.
キルア様。
That's great. The cut to that.
しまった！あんた、わざと私にいろいろ言ってきたんでしょ。
Maybe.
何のことかしら。
This is great voice acting. It's cute.
私はあと何機か手配したらその一つに乗っていくから。何言ってんの？飛行船が飛行船を追ってたらそっちの方が目立つでしょ。
I need to look up this voice actor.
しないわよ。何よ？そのあなた。
Oh, yeah, I've got to agree. Yeah. Yeah.
キルア様もそっちの方が好きだと思うわよ。バカにしてんでしょ。全然本心よ。
Oh, that's great. Long story, man. That's the Zoldycks.
あるかしかいない。でも、イルミはあるかを殺そうとしてる。俺のお願いが叶う代わりに、家族全
Right.
員が
But Killua knows another path to that fix. Right? You've got multiples, decoys.
こっちが余裕を見せたら、あっちに
But these two are professional hunters. You know? Licensed.
仲間とか呼ぶの？僕人見知りなんだ。
Okay, Hisoka.
いや、いないし。
Yeah, he's gonna make some, isn't
も
he?
ったいないけど、この針使うか。
Right? The title of the episode. Yeah. Whoa.
おお、
Hisoka.
いいオーラ発して。
Sure is. Ah.
これさして命令すると死ぬまで頑張ってくれるんだよ。
Damn.
っていうか、頑張りすぎて死ぬんだけど。
They do kind of look like lollipops, don't they?
それは確かに空恐ろしい能力だな。差別主義者に知れたら喜んで
Segregationists.
イル
Whoa.
ミは地上から飛行船をつけてくるだろう。基本兄貴は仲間を使わないから。針人間を使ってくるはずだ。
Needlemen.
念を込めた特殊な針で死ぬまで働く戦闘兵。
Beautiful hair.
犠牲となるのは一般人だ。
Just like that, eh? In the open.
刺された瞬間、廃人同様になる。
So that's that. They can't even be rescued. Look at this. Illumi's Needlemen army.
モランはハンターを募って針人間を捕獲、回収してくれ。
The Needlemen.
一般人を利用して再起不能した動かぬ証拠があれば、兄貴がプロのハンターでも確認。
Ah.
キルアが念押ししたのはハンター10か条
Ooh,
その4に
Hunter
こう記
Commandments.
されていたからだ。
Oh, that's the thing they meant in the last
ハンター
episode.
10か条その4、ハンターたるもの同胞のハンターを標的にしてはいけない。ただし甚だ悪質な犯罪行為に
Heinous criminal acts
及
and
んだ
yeah,
ものに
yeah.
その限りではない。
Harming innocent civilians. I guess that qualifies.
確か立候補者の中に10か条改定やハンター試験の見直しを主張している
That's right,
ハンタ
that's
ー
right.
だよな。
There's a couple of them actually from the last
イル
episode.
ミを捕まえれば、そいつらの考えに同調する連中が結構出るんじゃないの。
Give them a bit of fuel.
キルア、いいのか兄貴を売るんだぞ。
Yeah, it's
傷つけようとするやつは 俺が許さない。兄貴だろうが、なんだろうが、どんな手を使ってでも。
Yeah, I believe it. Oh yeah. He believes it too.
わかった。テラデインとブシドラは
Bushidora
おそらく快諾する。
and the other guy, I guess.
喜んで手を貸すハンターも多いはずだ。イルミとハレ人間は飛行船を見据えながら陸路で追尾してくるだろう。
病院のあるスワルダニシティ周辺へ接近する
It sounds like the narrator.
複数ポイントアタックできる地点があるので、
It is the narrator.
ハンターを送り込む。
ハレ人間の回収を最優先に行動すること。ハレの確認は後でいい。飛行船に近づく者は全員。
Hey, Lupe.
では行け。
Go!
Yeah, these are a bunch of red shirts though, eh? Handsome lad, eh? Illumi. Stupid sexy Illumi.
忙しくなるね。
Okay, Bushidora
いや
and Bison.
10か条の4は根本的に間違っていた。こんな輩が現れてからでは遅いのだ。教会員すべての
Yeah.
怪我される。試験をもっと厳正にす
You know, to be honest, I agree. I do
入
agree.
れる時点で正しくふるいにかければこんな
It's quite lax actually.
脱会長派と呼ばれた我々3人が
Lupe. Yeah, that's the narrator's voice.
時が
What?
我々3名はよく脱会長派と呼ばれますが、それは不意ではありません。我々の根底に流れるハンター魂は全
Is that right?
会長から受け継いだものです。それは断言いたします。そこで我々はその思いを受け
The hell am I looking at? More silhouettes?
行動する同志として前会長が過去に所属し八面六臂を成した伝説のハンター集
Oh, was that the chairman at the bottom?
精輪隊を
Another
再
group.
結成することといたします。
Come on, man. Don't do this to me.
副代表ルーペ、
Lupe Fiasco.
そして実動部隊の長として私ブシドラ
Yeah,
が
that's Netero, right? Front and center. Young Netero, the one who had the goatee, right?
代表であるテラデインに票を投じる
Oh,
ことを
solidarity.
ここで宣言いたします。
They mean
我々の
business.
趣旨に賛同していただける諸氏はぜひとも同志テラデインに一票を投じていただきたい。
Another silhouette shot of unknown characters. Look at the arms. Is that just so they don't have to animate him actually running, pumping his arms?
こうしてアルカをめぐるゾルディック家内の争いはハンター協会会長選挙も巻き込み、さらに激しさを増していった。
Okay, folks, episode 142, and yeah, it kind of continues the long goodbye, doesn't it? You know, yet another episode checked off, just the 6 to go. Yeah, I mean, you know, there's a lot of bittersweet moments in this episode as well. You know, the episode as a whole is actually quite a functional episode. You know, it kind of just keeps things ticking along, I suppose. I suppose if you compare it to the last stretch of episodes, it's really quite, I don't know, a low-key episode. I think it's fair to say that. Perhaps not the strongest episode, again, you know, in comparison to the last stretch of episodes, but it does have some really interesting things sprinkled throughout the episode as well, you know? You know, just now I spoke of how it's the long goodbye, yet in this episode, you see that Togashi just masterfully sets up something really quite exciting, right? The Saren group. You know, this is the crew before the crew. Essentially, right? This is meant to be the chairman Netero's group from some time ago, right? Decades ago, essentially. Togashi really enticing the audience to continue into the manga, right? Through this mention and just, you know, visual depiction. Again, you know, silhouettes and Hunter x Hunter go hand in hand. You know, yet another iconic silhouettes moment. But, you know, this time, pretty much all of them are completely unknown to me, other than perhaps, you know, the chairman himself, who is featured front and center, right? And I believe I've seen, you know, that version of the chairman before in flashbacks. It's the one that's got the goatee and the long hair, right? He's got a bit of a smug look, bit of an attitude about him, right? So that's kind of insane, you know, because the Saren group is kind of like a crew that it kind of really truly feels like perhaps it is a collection of, you know, the best of the best, right? Again, you kind of have to base all of it on the type of crew someone like a young Netero would, I don't know, be a part of, right? This, it kind of feels like the Zodiacs before the Zodiacs, but the Zodiacs actually have quite an interesting mix of all kinds of hunters. Not all of them excel in combat. That's not a requirement or anything, but the initial feeling I'm getting here is that the Saren group is actually the best of the best. And perhaps it is full of some of the best Nen practitioners around. But again, it's in the past tense, right? From the looks of it, as you've got Terradin and Lupe and I almost said Tezagera, not Tezagera. The last name, man, it's the easiest one, but I'm forgetting it now. Bushidora. Though of course Terradin is their spokesperson, right? That's the one they champion essentially, and kind of stand behind. But he essentially said that he seeks to reform, or they seek to reform this group, right? The Saren group. And this is something the former chairman belonged to, right? So it's essentially being resurrected. It's an idea that used to be a thing a long time ago. Again, the younger chairman, a much younger chairman at that, and they seem to believe that reforming that group is going to assist them in their endeavors. Hunter exam reform plus Hunter commandments reform. They do kind of go hand in hand, don't they? And I'll be honest, folks. I'll be honest. The last episode. Oh, this is kind of embarrassing at this point. In hindsight, I suppose, I didn't actually quite understand that they meant a different type of 10 commandments. I actually at first thought they're talking about the 10 commandments. So I didn't even really touch that. I'm like, huh? But the reason I didn't touch it in the discussion is because it still kind of seemed far-fetched. That he might be talking about those 10 commandments. But no, this is the Hunter 10 commandments. Listen, folks, I'm not a robot. I've got brain fart moments in me as well. You've seen them before, and it'll happen again. And before I go back to the Saren group, and let's theorize a bit and speculate a bit about that, and the disbanding of it and the potential reasoning behind it. These characters, the two of them specifically, and then you've got Lupe as well, who's joining up. But the other two, I kind of get it. I understand. They make a lot of good points, about the Hunter exam itself and these commandments. They actually do need a bit of touch-up, don't they? They do need reform. So yeah, I back them. I back them for some of these things for sure. It's interesting ideas here, interesting characters. And, like I said in the last episode, the fact that they go one by one and, kind of showcase each one of these characters, it became clear that, okay, they are about to play some kind of role in the remaining 7 episodes. And, immediately in the next episode, the 3 of them, the Lupe takes more of a backseat. The 2 of them really kind of, take center stage here. But, all due respect to these characters, are they really worthy of, reforming this group, the Saren group, right? Because, just immediately from the silhouette and how they spoke of it and how, the younger chairman used to run with this crew, right? I'm guessing it's a crew of bad motherfuckers, man. Some of these silhouettes are really quite interesting. Now, listen, it's possible that I actually do know 1 or 2 or 3. Who knows? Maybe. It's possible. But, I think as a whole, it's probably unlikely that I've seen many of them before, right? Again, this is a blast from the past, essentially, right? And it might have been disbanded for good reason, right? Maybe that was the right choice to disband the Saren group. So yeah, of course, on one end, I certainly respect the endeavors of Terradin and God damn it, I forgot the name again. Terradin and Bushidora, and of course Lupe as well assisting. But again, are they really up to that standard? But then, of course, beyond me as an audience member, how about the characters that actually exist within the story itself? How exactly are they going to react to this news? Right? Surely there might be some of them that are still around, kicking around, still alive. Hopefully, Now I'm not, see, the thing is, there's just the 6 episodes left. So I'm not really sure if it's really going to be able to dive into much of that, right? Again, it really truly felt like set up for the manga, right? Enticing us to move on to the manga. And the thing is, it's still not even a guarantee that I'll get immediate, answers or more on the Saren group. Right? Nothing is a guarantee, of course, given just the expansive nature of this cast, this incredible ensemble cast. There's just so much you can focus on, right? As it does kind of move on to the manga from the anime after episode 148. So once I do get to the manga, I'm not going to go in expecting definitive answers and revelations and, focus on really specific things. I think that'd be a bit misguided, actually. So, open-minded, but the manga, as far as I know, and I've been told, there's quite a bit of content and story progression for me to actually get to in the manga. And nothing's been spoiled for me, but I do know apparently that it does cover a lot of interesting characters. The focus is on a lot of interesting characters. But speaking of interesting characters, let's go back to the Saren group, right? And just the existence of that group. And, it's clear that it was a faction, an entity separate from the Hunter Association, right? So, their purpose, their, mission statement, their MO, all of those things are kind of bouncing around in my mind right now, right? Especially because young Netero is at the center of it all. There is one that I can kind of speculate and kind of maybe potentially attach to this group. And, of course, it's going to be someone like Jing Freaks, right? I could see Jing Freaks maybe being a part of it at some point. But again, the chairman has been alive, or he used to be alive for a long time, right? So the fact that they are using that silhouette of Netero, much younger Netero, I think I'm leaning toward this just being a collection of characters I've never seen before, perhaps. Maybe one or two. I almost said Zeno, but Zeno has always been a Zoldyck. I don't think he's taken a leave of absence from the family. But, look, someone like Killua certainly stepped out of the family. Is he the first and only to do that? Who knows? I don't know the entire history of the Zoldycks. They go far back, really far back. Some of them might have had a similar, trajectory as Killua, in a sense, because Killua is really quite unique, even as a Zoldyck, even as a kid, as a child. You see him in these flashbacks, he is so different, right? He's the heart. He simply is the heart of that family, him and Aluka, of course. But again, going back to the Saren group, are the Zodiacs essentially Netero's new take on them, right? Maybe he learned from his experiences with the Saren group, and then, he kind of brought in a mix of new types of hunters that he really is impressed with, right? And again, like I mentioned, it's a collection of different types of hunters. They excel in totally different types of fields. Of course, some of them do excel in combat situations as well. They're equipped for that, rather. So yeah, it's an interesting mix in the Zodiacs now, right? You've got Jing there, you've got Pearson there as well. Again, I have to reel in the expectations a bit. Like I said, I don't want to get too excited in terms of possibly getting a focus on them. But, one of the possibilities that kind of comes to mind is, again, this idea of secret missions. I kind of brought up that notion a couple of episodes ago, right? Pearson, as he's being grilled by the Ox, right? About missing hunters, and not just missing hunters, or rather, missing hunters because there's just no bodies. Because, dead hunters, okay, it happens, right? Because, ultimately you do come across a body, but here in this situation, something fishy, something quite strange at play, right? And one of the things I kind of speculated about is Pearson, listen, one thing is clear. There's so much more to Pearson than meets the eye, And I'm guessing, unfortunately, since there's only 6 episodes left, I'm not going to be able to, dive into that or get a look at that until I get to the manga, perhaps. But again, maybe there could be an upcoming episode that is a focus on Pearson and some of the Zodiacs again. I've been asking for that. But, it has kind of shifted the focus to the Zoldyck intermission arc, right? And from time to time, everything else is kind of sprinkled in. But yeah, I just really like this idea of secret missions, right? And someone like Pearson kind of facilitates that thought, right? That speculation. That's just how fascinating of a character he is in the time I do have with him so far in these episodes. So yeah, maybe, this squad, the Saren group, was the specialized group, for secret missions, really tough missions, perhaps, expeditions and all of that. Jing's been on expeditions himself. I remember Kite speaking to, you can even use someone like Satots, right? Jing's had his own journey. quite a legendary journey at that. But let me kind of build on this idea of secret missions as well, and give you my thought process on it. To me, it's almost even kind of like this, speculation about one-way missions, right? A long time ago, years ago, maybe over a decade at this point, there's this failed publicity thing, ultimately ended up being just like this hoax. It was called Mars One, and the whole point of it was to have everyone apply. You can look it up. You can Google it. I mean, the whole thing is all about how it's going to be a one-way trip to Mars, right? And, they're going to send normal people out there, right? As long as you're in good physical health. They had a whole thing that you can go check out and listen, it was a big thing. And, call me crazy, but a part of me really kind of wanted to apply to it. But yeah, ultimately it just ended up being just impossible. The things that they are trying or promising, the amount of funding and the research and all of that you would need to pull something off of that ilk, right? It was nearly impossible. But that was kind of my thinking behind the secret missions speculation, right? The bodies aren't found, there's missing hunters because perhaps it's meant to be like that. They're not meant to come back, and they made that choice. So listen, all I'm really doing here is kind of hyping myself up to, go into the manga, right? And of course, like I said, I'll be going into the manga. There is going to be a break, and, I'll be honest, it'll be a substantial break. It is. But once I get back into it, it'll be exciting. I'm sure it'll be exciting for me and for you guys as well. So, that's going to be on the horizon, maybe, second half of 2025. But again, that's not something I can promise. Listen, I'll keep it real because it is possible that it could be an early 2026 thing, right? It's a possibility. But the one thing that is a guarantee is that it'll happen at some point. It certainly needs to happen because, again, the anime seems to be... it just doesn't look like the anime is going to be continuing anytime soon. But yeah, to go back to the three of them, Lupe, Bushidora, and Teradin, they've essentially formed their own electoral party, right? And run as a fortified unit within the election. And, they're seeking, a response, they're seeking backing and all of that. And listen, like I said, I do agree with a lot of their ideas. There's going to be many other people out there that are going to agree, right? That a lot of these things need reform. They simply do. I mean, some of the prime examples are on display, showcased throughout this episode. You've got Hisoka and Illumi. These types of characters are allowed to go through the Hunter exam, right? You could easily see how they arrived at this idea of reform, this idea of the screening just not being up to standard and the whole Hunter exam procedure just not being up to standard. They're not strict enough. Even from the first arc, it's been so clear that the Hunter exam just almost like a free-for-all. Anyone and everyone is allowed to apply and go through the process, right? Anyone. As I saw, people like Hisoka and Illumi. Hisoka specifically killed an examiner the year before, yet he's still allowed to just run through the exam again, right? Not only just run through it, he's essentially given a license. By the end of it, he's a pro hunter, recognized as a pro hunter, right? And now you see, it's really quite clever by Killua, isn't it? To introduce these speed bumps, to get other eyes on Illumi. Really clever. So ultimately, the Zoldyck's intermission has now spilled over into the path of the Hunter Association election, right? And within that, specific factions that are really, dead set on reform. And, this has given them the perfect example. And, again, really clever by Killua. He picked up on all of this after doing a bit of research, right? After that, Hunter Association program is played. Killua clearly heard about them and latched onto that idea. Okay, there's a few of them that are really quite strict about this. But, going back to Bushidora and Teradin, I do like this idea of them, wanting to be a bit more proactive, much more proactive, right, in the screening process. So you can avoid these types of characters, right? Villains, as he called him, right? Illumi. Right now they're being forced into doing this. Because again, it's a bit lax, and essentially as a whole, the Hunter Association allowed a bit too much of wiggle room, if you will, to some of these hunters. Some of the people that are actually going on to become hunters, right? Regardless of their backgrounds. But as always, there's two sides to the coin, right? You do have to look at the other side of it, right? The hunter exam as it is at the moment and has been perhaps for decades and who knows how long, right? And again, the types of people that are allowed to be pro hunters, that are able to go through the screening process and through the hunter exam itself, right till the conclusion of it, right? There's got to be something there, yes, it's a bit loose, right? It's a little bit dangerous, but ultimately I do think there must have been some interesting logic behind allowing the Hisokas of the world, right? And the Illumis of the world, and many others as well, to go through the exam. I mean, I think at the most basic level, it kind of lands these types firmly on their radar, right? Now that they are officially a part of it, they can essentially be monitored to an extent, I suppose. I'm not saying they're always monitored, but, again, they're on their radar. And it also kind of stops them from creating or forming their own factions, right, to rival the Hunter Association. Then you've got another issue or problem on your hands. And also, hunters are just so unique. They come in all kinds of, shapes and sizes, of course. But, as far as the things they excel in, right, how much of a screening process can you really truly have? How much can you really dilute it? Because at some point you might run the risk of diluting it a bit too much, right? Screening it a bit too much, that you begin to kind of lose that unique nature of hunters, right? The variety, if you will, even if, it has its own dangers. Not everyone is cookie cutter, right? A lot of these people, a lot of these aspiring, pro hunters acquired their skill sets through, really unique means. Right? Everyone's got their own path in life. And for many of them, not everything's legal. They had to climb the ladder, and it's rough for a lot of them. And again, to harness a lot of their, unique talents, sometimes, it's on a path that is essentially just, frowned upon or illegal or just dangerous, I mean, a prime example of that is someone like Shalnark, right? The homie Shalnark from the Phantom Troop, licensed hunter, pro hunter, right? But his path in life, right? It's a bit rough, He is a part of a rogue, faction, bandits essentially, right? Yet he is also qualified to be a pro hunter, right? Because he is quite qualified. He is quite impressive. But speaking of Hisoka, it's quite a showing for Hisoka, and I'm so damn glad that he's getting this focus, right at the conclusion of the anime as well. Of course, Hisoka in his element. Unfortunately for Goto, it's just not even that much of a challenge, right? Yes, Goto presents a few interesting pushbacks, right? But Hisoka just immediately has a counter. It's not even that it's a counter. He's a few steps ahead already. He already prepared for something like this, or something that could be essentially used against him, right? His battle IQ is exceptional, right? He's so cunning and experienced that you always make him the favorite in any fight, any one-on-one encounter. But, that's the exciting thought, is that I do want to see Hisoka really truly be challenged. Like, I want to see Hisoka bloodied up, right? I want to see him get tested, truly tested, right? Like, he's on the ropes. He has to dig deep to just stay into the fight, right? Or in the fight, rather. So, it's a bit of a shame that the Chrollo Hisoka fight didn't happen, because that could have been the type of fight I'm looking for. But listen, I know I've got the manga ahead of me. Maybe I'll get something like that, right? Hisoka being tested and pushed to his limits and beyond. Just the notion of that, just the idea of that, someone like Hisoka being tested to his limits, that's incredibly exciting, man. It really is, because of just how experienced he is, how calm he is in the field. But of course, unfortunately, and as expected, I do lose Goto. Like I said, he's been there from the really early days of this anime. Yes, he didn't show up until recently again, but he's been established really early on, and he's really sympathetic to Killua, right? As much as he can be openly. So to lose people that are, essentially loyal to Killua and that want to help Killua at all times as much as they can, right? Given their, job title. So part of me is a little bit on edge, about Kanaria now, because Hisoka's out there, right? And I believe Illumi told him to go take care of the fakes, right? The decoys, I believe. Unless I'm reading that wrong. But yeah, hopefully Canaria makes it out of it, right? And, you know, I've got to say, you know, the scenes with Canaria and Amane, you know, great banter, great levity. And yes, indeed, she is rather cute, Amane. You know, just the drawing, the character design, you know, the eyebrows, everything, and the voice acting. That's got to be some of the cutest voice acting, if that's even a thing. You know, I think it's a thing, but I think I most definitely need to look up that voice actor. It's just, the voice is so damn cute, right? So great banter. Love to see that. Love to see someone like Amane also kind of get to, you know, loosen up a bit. You know, it's not by choice, but you see, you know, being in that position as a Zoldyck butler, you're kind of required to, you know, put on a mask essentially. But then speaking of butlers, my God, I think I saw one of the most bizarre and odd things in this anime, and that's saying something because I've seen some crazy shit in this anime, and I'm speaking of Subane transforming into a bike, a motorcycle, right? I mean, not, you know, technically it's not transforming, just, you know, from a visual standpoint, yeah, you know, it's a bike. I suppose she could be a conjurer or a transmuter, right? But, you know, the really unique, listen, yes, it's silly and it's kind of stupid, let's be honest here, it just is, you know, just the whole idea of it feels rather odd. And, you know, the whole idea of having to ride, you know, grandma motorbike and everything. But that's that. Let's kind of actually tackle it and look at the ability itself. So like I said, you know, I think I'm looking at a transmuter or a conjurer, because both of those can kind of apply here, right? She is conjuring a form or transmuting herself or her aura into a form. So yeah, you know, I'm not quite sure, you know, which one it might be, but I'm pretty certain it's got to be at least one of those. But, you know, there is an interesting element because this is the type of ability that requires others to use it, because, you know, it's clear that the aura is being leached or fed from others, right? And that's the reason Amane said that, you know, it's better if there's two of us because, you know, your aura is being used, right? It's being leached. And again, you know, the more aura, more people, the faster it's going to go, I suppose. And I mean, you know, if imagine the late Goto actually showed up as well and he goes for a ride on grandma motorbike as well, I mean, they'd be much faster, even faster. I mean, it's really quite impressive. I mean, you see Killua is really quite shocked, right? They could easily just keep up. He had to actually, you know, come up with a different plan of action almost immediately to actually get away. But yeah, I think that should do it for this one, folks. If you enjoyed that, consider dropping a like, consider dropping some comments, give me your thoughts. If you are interested in early access or full opacity or timer-based full length, consider checking out the Patreon page and get immediate access to multiple early access episodes at that. The links are in the description and the pinned comment, also links to social media. Right then, thank you so much for joining me, folks, and thank you for your time, because time is precious. It really is. And I do hope to see you again soon for the next one. As the long goodbye continues. Bittersweet, man. Really quite bittersweet. Until then, take it easy.